In recent months, talk of a massive new uranium deal between India and Canada has quietly resurfaced in policy circles, and it is raising more questions than answers. A $2.8 billion agreement sounds like a predictable continuation of a civil nuclear cooperation. Yet, the history wrapped around it complicates things far more than it appears at first glance. Why is Canada ready to move ahead when past agreements ended in sanctions, mistrust, and international scrutiny? And what does this shift suggest about how both countries now interpret nuclear responsibility in an increasingly tense world? India is expanding its nuclear footprint at a rapid pace, with dozens of reactors operating or under construction, and its appetite for imported uranium keeps growing. Canada, meanwhile, seems prepared to revisit a partnership that once shaped the global debate on nuclear safeguards. To understand why the new uranium agreement feels so unsettling, we have to look back at the moment cooperation between the two countries first unraveled. In the 1970s, Canada imposed sanctions after discovering that India had diverted Canadian-supplied nuclear material into weapons research, a decision that shattered what had once been a promising partnership. The breach didn't only strain bilateral ties, it helped trigger the creation of the Nuclear Supplies Group, the very framework designed to prevent sensitive nuclear materials from being repurposed for military use. Fast forward a few decades, and the tone shifted dramatically. By 2010, political enthusiasm and the lure of economic opportunity seemed to overshadow the earlier lessons. Canadian policymakers, encouraged by industry, signed a civil nuclear deal that essentially reset the relationship. Yet, the fundamental concern persisted. India has long sought to accumulate substantial reserves of nuclear fuel, blending imported uranium with domestic output in ways that could serve both civilian reactors and potentially military programs. As India's nuclear infrastructure expands at a rapid pace, the memory of those earlier violations has quietly faded from the public debate. And it is this gradual erosion of historical awareness that makes the current agreement far more consequential than it may initially appear. India's proliferation record adds another layer of complexity to the uranium deal, and it's a chapter that rarely receives the level of scrutiny it deserves. Despite public claims of maintaining a responsible nuclear posture, India's past behavior often points in a different direction. Several senior officials, including former Nuclear Power Corporation of India Chairman Dr. Y.S.R. Prasad and Sri Chaudhary Surinder, were sanctioned by the United States for transferring sensitive nuclear technology to Iran. Around the same period, other Indian entities such as the state-owned PDIL and Release India, part of a major private conglomerate, were penalized for assisting programs tied to weapons of mass destruction. And the concerns extended further. In 2003, relations between India and the United States briefly soared after the CIA released an unclassified report outlining India's covert nuclear trade with Libya. The report even referenced Indian financial support for a Libyan missile program. For a country now framed as a trustworthy nuclear partner, these episodes complicate that narrative. Adding to this is India's inconsistent enforcement of export controls and recurring lapses in nuclear facility oversight. These are not minor administrative shortcomings. They reveal systematic vulnerabilities that have enabled illicit procurement networks to thrive. When such patterns persist, the risks linked to deeper nuclear cooperation become increasingly difficult to dismiss. Part of what makes the emerging uranium deal so striking is how little resistance it faces from the major global powers. The United States and several key allies have increasingly softened their tone on India's non-proliferation shortcomings, often reframing them as historical footnotes rather than ongoing structural concerns. This shift stems from a broader strategic calculation. Integrating India more deeply into Western political and technological networks is viewed as counterweight to China's expanding influence across the Indo-Pacific. But in trying to pull India closer, policymakers risk overlooking the vulnerabilities that continue to shape its nuclear system. Expanded access to dual-use technology, lighter scrutiny, and growing political endorsement each magnify the potential risks. And these risks become even more significant when set against India's rapidly expanding nuclear weapons program, now one of the fastest growing in the world. As momentum builds around the new uranium deal, it's worth pausing to consider what's quietly slipping out of the conversation. The agreement may look routine on paper, but its implications stretch far beyond commercial exchange. India's unresolved proliferation record, its expanding weapons program, and the gradual fading of past lessons all point to a far complicated landscape than policymakers acknowledge. So what does this mean for global non-proliferation? Ignoring these concerns does not ease the risk, it amplifies it. If you found this analysis useful, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay safe and stay kind. Allah Hafiz.